where we are. Let's see. We have implemented find all users. We've implemented find user by ID. And how about being able to find user by username, right? Notice that the two finder methods that we used were part of a boilerplate set, right, of finders, right, the most common ones, right? So those were already provided by the repository. But you should be able to do any query, right, of any arbitrary query, but without committing to any specific dialect of the MySQL of the SQL language, right? Depends. So we want to be independent of the vendor, right? So to do that, ORMs typically what will allow you to do is use an intermediate language, a higher level language, right? That is not specific to any one particular vendor, right? So what JPA does is that it allows you to use a dialect of SQL that is called JPQL, right? As in Java persistence, that does not map directly to the schema, right, or any of the field names or anything. It stays still in the object-oriented world, right? So for instance, here it says select U, right, from user U, right? We know that there's a table called user, but this user here is not actually the table user, right? It's the class user, right? So it stays in the object-oriented world, and you can use object-oriented concepts such as dot notation, right? It allows you to navigate classes that contain classes, right? As opposed to navigating, the way you navigate in a relational database is that you follow foreign keys with primary keys with foreign keys with primary keys. That's how you navigate between the tables, right? In an object-oriented world, the way you navigate between related classes is through dot notation, where you have an aggregate or a composition relationship between the different classes, right? So that's fully allowed here. Also notice that this user and this U variable, we're declaring U as a variable of type user, which could then be used as a dot notation to refer to fields in the class. These are not fields in the record in the schema. These are fields that are referred to in the class. So this is a username property in the user class, not a username field in the user table. Okay. So again, this query is entirely in the object world. Okay. So the way that we use these queries is that we declare these the interface of the function. We declare it in the repository. Okay, and we annotate it saying what query do we want to execute when we call this function, and any parameters that we want to use to map them into the query. Right. So let's take that. Let's take this query verbatim, right, and paste it in the user repository. So let's go in the user repository, and let's paste it in here. There we go. And this is a return type of the function. There we go. All right, so and we'll need to import a couple of things here. We need to import the query interface, and we'll need to import the param interface. There we go. Oh, okay, that's the wrong param. That's not it. It's this one. There we go. All right. So now, right, we can use this JPA function that we just declared, and we mapped it to the query that we want to execute, right? So that we can now call it from the user repository, just like any other function, right? So the 5 basic use cases are already implemented for us. Any additional cases we would have to be implementing ourselves. But notice that we don't actually have to get a hold of a connection or a statement or a result set or anything like that. So let's go back to the user service, and now we can implement a query that can read from it. So what we're going to do here is that we're going to use the same exact implementation that finds all users, just because they're going to be we're gonna use exactly the same mapping /API/user, right? And then just add a query parameter right after that, right? Question mark username equal Alice, or username equal B Dylan, or C Brown, or whatever, right? Now the query parameters is ignored, right? When the web services is trying to match the URLs, right? The query parameter does not break ties, right? Of the pattern, the URL pattern, right? So we're going to have to use the same exact mapping that we use for find all users, and we're going to have to say, well, there might be, as part of the URL, there might be a query parameter. Sometimes there will be, sometimes there won't be, right? If there is no query parameter, it should be interpreted as I want all the users, right? But if there's a query parameter afterwards, then that means that query parameter is part of some filter on how we want to filter the users, okay? So what we're going to do here is that find all users, you'll notice that it was declared with right here, find all users. Notice that it takes no arguments. So instead, we're going to add arguments there that might be there and might not be there. Okay, we're going to make them optional. Right? It won't be required. Right? But if it is there, we want to parse it out. If it's not there, it's just going to be ignored. All right? So that's what we're going to do here. We're going to say request parameter. That maps to the query string. All right? And if it's there, we want to parse out that query parameter and map it to the following username string parameter, username parameter, right? Meaning, look in the query parameter. If you find it, extract it. It's not required. If it's not there, just ignore. That's fine. But if it is there, provide it here as a username local variable. Okay. So we'll need to import the request parameter. There it is. And if it's there, now we can add part of this logic. We can say, well, if there is a username, we want to use it in the query. If it's not, then we're just going to treat this the normal way. Right? So we're going to do things such as, if there is a username, if it's not null, then we're going to do the query of retrieving the username the user by username, which we already have in the repository. We're going to say user repository dot find user by username, right? That's what we declared earlier in the repository. And we can then pass the username as an argument. And then we can return it, right? If it goes in here, then we would, it would just return right away, right? It would not continue to return all the users. I think we'll need to cast this to be a list of users. There we go. All right, so it's either going to go here or it's going to go here. Right, so if there is a username, it's going to execute here and return. Right, it's not going to continue. Or if there is no username, it'll just continue over here. Make sense? All right. All right. So let's try it out. Let's execute this. Let's restart this. And let's make sure that the default behavior is still the same. That we haven't broken that. We can hit this with just API user. That still works, right? It still returns the list of all the users. But if I do provide a query parameter of username equal Alice, right, it only returns Alice, okay? Or C Brown, right, or B Dylan. Okay, all right. There we go. So again, you can extend the value of the user repository by adding any number of queries, right? And you have all of them. You have updates, you have inserts, you have deletes, right? If you want to do something, delete a specific, only remove the records that meet a particular criteria, and you can parameterize it and pass those parameters in through the function that are passed in here. Okay, awesome. So so the next thing we're going to be taking a look at is being able to do additional updates. Oh, actually, no, we have another query here. If we want to, for instance, find by credentials, right? You know, is this person there by these credentials? So let's add that very quickly. We're just going to grab this and we're going to add it to our repository. So let's see, we can just add it right here. Oops, copy, paste. So here's a request, a query that is just checking to see username and password. And if it finds it, here's a parameter of the username and password. We don't need that. And there it is. That's our interface. And so now our service, we can add another parameter here. We can add yet another parameter, request parameter, but instead of username, it'll be a password parameter. So this will be username, which is not username is not required. Password is also not required, and we'll map it to a local variable password. And here we can put this maybe as an if you have both password and you have a username, then do the and this would be an else if. This would be an else, and this will be we'll return user repository find by credentials, and we'll pass in the username and the password. And we'll cast this to a list of users. There we go. Okay. We want to try to start at the most specific case, right, and move ourselves to more generic, right, and then just the most broader case is that there's nothing in the parameters, right, and we just return all of them. Okay. All right. So if we restart this real quick, let's see. We can test it. So again, so this is all the users, and maybe we can retrieve Alice and Alice. So we can provide here question mark, username is Alice, and the password is also Alice. Right, it returns that one person. Okay, all right, awesome. Let's move on to more new and exciting things.